إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ما يهده الله فلا مضل له وما يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. The next part of the book that we're going to talk about is that the author, he says, and again we're going over Kashf ash-Shubuhât by Muhammad ibn Abdil-Wahhab. He says, so if you know this, or if you know that the person can disbelieve or leave Islam with a word that comes off of his tongue, and he might say it and he's ignorant about it, but he would not be given the excuse of ignorance, or he would not be excused due to his ignorance on this topic, or he may say something and he believes that it's actually bringing him closer to Allah Ta'ala, just as the mushrikeen or the polytheists or the people of shirk do, then you should know, or that you'll have a good understanding of what Allah Ta'ala mentioned about the people of Musa alayhi salatu wassalam. Despite their righteousness and despite their knowledge, they came to him and they said, and then he mentions when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَجَاوَزْنَا بِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ الْبَحْرَ فَأَتَوْا عَلَى قَوْمٍ يَعْكُفُونَ عَلَى أَصْنَامٍ لَهُمْ قَالُوا يَا مُوسَى اجْعَلْ لَنَا إِلَهًا كَمَا لَهُمْ آلِهَةٌ قَالَ إِنَّكُمْ قَوْمٌ تَجْهَلُونَ. Or he mentions, or the author mentions, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, or the translation of which is, and we brought the children of Israel across the sea, and they came upon a people devoted to some of their idols. They said, O Musa, make for us an ilah, or a god, as they have alihah, or as they have their gods, or they have their things that they worship. He said, verily you are a people who are ignorant, or a people who know not. And that's from Surah Al-A'raf, verse 138. So then the author continues, he says, if you understand this, so meaning if you understand the fact that someone can disbelieve and leave Islam just by a statement that they say on their tongue, and they don't even know, maybe they don't even know the greatness or the severity of what they're saying, and he says, then at that point, your fear and your zeal for Islam or for knowledge would increase, and your zeal to have knowledge about that which would keep you safe from this matter and the likes of it would increase and would be great. So this section here, there's a number of points that we can talk about. The first one, and it's the one I'll probably focus on a little bit more now, is when he said, or the author said, that the person can disbelieve by a statement that he says. So there's 2 points here that I'll talk about in this topic. The first is the fact that someone can disbelieve with a statement, and the second one is that he can disbelieve with a statement while not actually knowing exactly what it meant, or not actually being completely aware of the severity of what he's saying. So there's 2 points to this section. So the first point, which is that someone can disbelieve with a statement that they say. So this is a matter of consensus amongst ash-Sunnah wal-Jamâ'ah. Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah mentioned that it was a consensus that Îmân is statements and actions, and it's in the heart or beliefs, and that none of them would benefit a person without the other. So meaning that if someone has belief in their heart, yet it's not on their tongue, meaning they haven't professed to La ilaha illallah, even if they believe in their heart, this wouldn't benefit them. And likewise, if someone says La ilaha illallah on their tongue, but they don't act upon it, or they don't believe it in their heart, then this would also not benefit them. And also, like we talked about many times before, and I gave many examples, if someone does many good deeds, many acts of worship, if they don't believe it in their heart, in Islam, and they don't profess to La ilaha illallah so that they entered Islam to begin with, then this would also not benefit them. So based upon this, what Imam al-Shafi'i narrated, the consensus on this topic, and Imam al-Bukhari mentioned that he met 1,000 scholars in the different towns that he went to, and all of them agreed that Îmân is statements and actions. Then likewise, there's a consensus amongst ash-Sunnah wal-Jamâ'ah that disbelief or kufr is also statements and actions, and meaning so that it can be on your tongue, and it can be in your heart, and it can be on your body. So meaning someone may leave Islam due to something that they believe. Someone may leave Islam due to something that they say, and someone may leave Islam due to something that they do. So it's possible to actually leave Islam in all these ways as well. So just like it's required for a person to be Muslim that they have belief in their heart, that they say statements on their tongue, meaning the Shahada, and that they perform actions of Islam, likewise the opposite. So it's possible that someone could leave Islam in the same way. So this is what the author is mentioning when he says that it's possible for someone to disbelieve or to leave Islam with a statement that they say on their tongue. And the evidence for this from the Quran is many. So first of all, any evidence in the Quran that would indicate that that statements are required for a person to be Muslim, likewise would they would prove the opposite as well, that someone can disbelieve, because it's not possible for us to say a statement can be something good but it can't be something bad. And likewise, it's not possible for us to say that a statement can be required for a person to be Muslim, but it actually couldn't take him out of Islam. So meaning if he said the complete opposite of what makes you a Muslim, but if he said the complete opposite, that it wouldn't take you out of Islam. And this is a matter of consensus as well amongst as-Sunnah wal-Jamâ'ah. And the classical books of Aqidah discuss this at length. Ash-Shari'ah by al-Ajurri, and Sharh i'tiqad as-Sunnah wal-Jamâ'ah by al-Lalaka'i, and many other books as well, which is not really the point to go into this right now. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned examples of this in the Quran, particularly in Surah At-Tawbah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أَكَفَرْتُمْ بَعْدَ إِيمَانِكُمْ, or did you disbelieve? قَدْ كَفَرْتُمْ بَعْدَ إِيمَانِكُمْ, or you have disbelieved after your iman. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قُلْ أَبِاللَّهِ وَآيَاتِهِ وَرَسُولِهِ كُنْتُمْ تَسْتَهْزِئُونَ لَا تَعْتَذِرُوا قَدْ كَفَرْتُمْ بَعْدَ إِيمَانِكُمْ, or that he said, is it that you mock Allah and His ayat and His messenger? Don't give any excuses, you've disbelieved after your iman. So here, clearly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning that that these people, what they did was they mocked. Mocking clearly is something on the tongue. And despite then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned this about them, at the end He said, don't give any excuses, you've disbelieved after your iman. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that the reason that they disbelieved was this statement. And He described the results of this statement as being that these people had left Islam. And if we look to the tafsir of this verse, and there's many narrations on it, some are weak, some are hasan, but in general, what we know about the reason why the verse was revealed is that some of the companions at the time were traveling, and as a means to break the monotony of the travel and to keep themselves busy, they began to joke and tell stories. So they made a statement about the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Qurra specifically of them, so meaning the scholars and those who were the reciters and the memorizers of the Quran. And they said that we don't see any of them or anyone to be more cowardice or to have more cowardice when it comes to fighting, nor to have larger bellies, so meaning that they were saying that they were lazy and that they were gluttons or that they would eat and all they cared about was these things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse. So the making fun of the Sahaba in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, particularly making fun of the Qurra, they were making fun and they were insulting the ones who were carrying the knowledge on behalf of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or carrying the knowledge from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we see from this that people nowadays may say something much, much greater than this, but think that it has no effect. But if we look to this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly and He said, don't even give any excuses. Don't give any excuses, you've disbelieved after your iman. So there was no excuse for this even. And if we look to what the excuses that they did give to the Prophet ﷺ, they said, we were only saying it out of joking. So they didn't actually believe it. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed. So the benefit that we can take from this is that the Prophet ﷺ didn't tell them, no, you actually believe this. He accepted what they said. He accepted that they didn't actually believe this. They didn't believe in this mocking and this these insults that they were saying to the Prophet ﷺ. But they did leave Islam, obviously, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly judged, and He said, you've disbelieved after your Îmân. So, this proves that the statement was the cause of their disbelief. They didn't actually believe it in their heart. And they were saying it as a joke. But despite this, it wasn't an excuse, and it didn't benefit them. So what would we say about someone who says a statement that insults Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, or Islam as a whole, or the Quran, and they actually believe it? If just saying the statement would take you out of Islam, what about someone who actually believes it? And what about someone who makes dua to other than Allah, and they actually have the belief behind this statement as well? So we know that any statement that contradicts or that goes against the basis of Islam, so that goes against the very meaning of La ilaha illallah, which is to not worship anyone except Allah, any statement that would clearly contradict this, so meaning making dua to other than Allah or anything like this, that this would be something that would take the person out of Islam. So just a point to mention here then is kind of the widespread idea about this topic nowadays, is that someone will say something and maybe a Muslim will rebuke them, or they'll censor them, or they'll make inkar on them for what they've said. Or the person will do something and then the Muslim will come and say this as well. And you'll hear people, instead of rushing to the side of the Muslim or rushing to the side of the brother who has ghayrah for his deen, they'll rush to the other side and say, you don't know what was in his heart. And how often do we hear this all the time? You don't know what was in his heart. Brother, Îmân is in the heart. We don't know what he's thinking. Maybe he didn't know, and this and this and this. So first of all, there's the obvious problem here, that why is this always the excuses and the rushing to defend is always going to the side that's of the people who are doing something wrong. So that's a problem in and of itself that would needs its own discussion. But what we need to understand here is that whole statement of, well, brother, Îmân is in the heart. Well, yes, it's in the heart, but it's also on the tongue and it's also on the body. Just like disbelief can take place in the heart, and disbelief can take place on the tongue, and disbelief can take place on the body. So this idea and this misconception is, kind of the widespread accepted idea. And if you go to the Muslim countries, this is kind of the widespread idea that is, spread amongst the general people, and even amongst those who are people attribute them to knowledge. So you'll often hear this statement as well, that you don't know what was in his heart, and you don't know what was in his heart, and how do you know what he believed, and maybe he didn't believe it, and maybe he didn't make it halal, and how do you know he didn't do that? And it always comes back to this idea of the heart being the sole place where Îmân can take place, and the sole place where disbelief can also take place, and that everything else is kind of either completely disregarded, or it's taken into account, but it doesn't have as much weight as whatever takes place in the heart. And the reason for this is, if we look to where does this idea come from? This idea of Îmân only being in the heart, or not being on the tongue, or not being on the body, and then the opposite as well, like I said, disbelief only being in the heart and not on the body and not on the tongue. This goes back to the concept of irja', or the concept of which really comes, it's the group of the Murji'ah, and they're different groups, but the point is that they take away actions from being part of Îmân or part of kufr, and they take away statements from being part of Îmân and part of kufr as well. And the funny thing is that this book that we're reading now, the Murji'ah today, this is one of the main books that they talk about all the time, and they'll say, we're going to study Kashf ash-Shubuhât, and we're going to go through it, and we're going to learn all the benefits from it, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to do this and this and this. Throughout the whole book essentially is a refutation of all of their ideology. The whole thing is talking about making dua to other than Allah, insulting Allah, insulting the Prophet ﷺ, calling on the Salihin, calling on the different dead people, and going to the graves, and all these types of things, and how someone can leave Islam through this. And actually, if we look to the final approximately last page, between 1 and 3 pages of the book, depending on which one you have, the whole thing is a refutation of the Murji'ah and the Irja' of the people that make these claims. Specifically, if we look, to the end of the book, which we don't need to get ahead of ourselves, but when the author mentions when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the disbelievers, when they perform their disbelief and refuse to enter into Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ اسْتَحَبُّوا الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا عَلَى الْآخِرَةِ, or that is because they chose the life of the dunya over the akhirah. So, if we look at this verse, we see that the point is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, the reason they didn't enter Islam wasn't because they didn't believe in it. It wasn't because they hated it. It wasn't because they found something better. It was because they chose the life of the dunya over the akhirah. So what bigger evidence do we need from the Qur'an, and what clearer evidence do we need from the Qur'an that this idea that disbelief can't take place except in the heart, or that disbelief, or in order for someone to disbelieve, it's a condition that they disbelieve in their heart. This is, a complete refutation of this. So this is, just a kind of a discussion on the first part of what the author mentioned. The second part is that he said that the person could say something while he's ignorant of the issue. So this comes back to a topic that the scholars refer to al-udhr bil-jahl, or the excuse of ignorance, or the excuse of misconceptions or ta'wil when it comes to performing acts of disbelief or statements of disbelief. So what does this mean? This means that if you see a person go to a grave, whether they're a Sufi or they're from the Rafida or from the Shia or whatever group they are, they go to a grave or they go to a shrine or they go to whatever and they make dua to whatever, either the person in the grave or whatever the case may be. Do we then say that this person could possibly have an excuse for what they're doing? Do we say, well, we have to check, did they actually know that this was wrong? So this is what it comes down to. If we look to the words of the Imams of the Najdi Da'wah, the vast majority of them don't give any excuse for these types of things. And likewise, Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim, if you look at some of their words, they indicate that they wouldn't give an excuse to this type of thing. Some of their words would indicate otherwise. But in the end, what it comes down to, and the thing that everyone has agreed upon from ash-Sunnah wal-Jamâ'ah, is that ignorance isn't always an excuse. Some never give it. Some only give it for certain issues. But the general, or the consensus that everyone has agreed upon, is this idea that regardless of what the person does and regardless of what the person says, you can never judge on them that they've left Islam, and you can never say that what they're doing is kufr until you establish the proof against them for this issue. And what does this come back to? This comes back to, how can someone say La ilaha illallah, which is what we've talked about for the last, 3 weeks, of what the meaning of La ilaha illallah is, and the ease of understanding it in its most basic form. Maybe someone won't understand every point of it and everything that it entails, but just the basic understanding that if you're saying nothing is worthy of worship except Allah, and then you go and worship something other than Allah, have you actually understood this? Either you haven't understood it, so is your Islam valid to begin with, or you have understood the meaning, and then that's proof that you did know what you were doing, and you did know that it was wrong, because you entered Islam, you professed to La ilaha illallah, you professed that nothing deserves to be worshipped except Allah, and then you go and worship something other than Allah. There's obviously some sort of, there's a gap here, and which is the gap? Is it that you knew what it meant and just decided to do it anyway, and if that's the case, then you have no excuse? Or you knew what it meant, you didn't know what it meant, and then did you really enter Islam to begin with? Obviously, both of these are clear. They wouldn't be Muslim in either case. The only time when it would be an excuse is if the person doesn't actually know that the act that they're performing is an act of worship. So this is the time when it would come to be something that would be an excuse. So they understand La ilaha illallah, they say La ilaha illallah, they don't even know that they're worshipping other than Allah. This is when it would be an excuse, because if you say to them, can somebody be worshipped other than Allah? They'll say, no, of course not. I'm a Muslim, I don't accept this for anyone to do, and I would never let anyone call to this or anything like this. So obviously, and then if you tell them, well, this is an act of worship, and they don't even know that it is. So this is when the excuse of ignorance would come into play, and that's agreed upon. So this idea that regardless of where the person lives, regardless of what knowledge we know they have, that we always give this excuse and we say that, oh, the person didn't know, oh, the person didn't know. This is an absolutely false, false concept. And it comes down to that there's sometimes that it would be an excuse and sometimes that it wouldn't be an excuse. And this comes back to, again, like we talked about, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, the story or the tafsir of Abdullah ibn Abbas in Sahih al-Bukhari, when he mentioned about the people of Nuh. And he said that, he describing when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran about Wad and Suwa' and Yaghuth and Ya'uq and Nasr, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma is saying, well, how did this come about? How did these people begin to be worshipped, and where did these idols come from? Because Ibn Abbas mentions that there were 10 generations between Adam and Nuh. All of them were upon Tawhid. So obviously we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam and he was upon Tawhid, and he taught his family and his children Tawhid. And then there were 10 generations upon Tawhid. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to send Nuh. For what reason? When his people went too far and they went to extremism with regards to the Salihin or the righteous people amongst them. So these people, Wad and Suwa' and the people that I just mentioned, they were Salihin from the people of Nuh, or they were righteous people amongst them. When they died, the shaitan came to them and said, why don't you make idols that would commemorate them and it would remind you about their salah and their righteousness? So they did this. Then after, when Ibn Abbas says, then when the knowledge was forgotten, they worshipped them. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to send Nuh to teach these people. So we see here that if we were to say, well, they didn't know, Ibn Abbas himself is saying, well, when the knowledge was gone, they started to do this. So we would, by necessity, have to say that every person in the people of Nuh had an excuse, and there was, it wasn't upon Nuh to even call them disbelievers, and there was that even when Nuh was sent to his people, he was sent to a Muslim people. This is what this would necessitate us to say. And likewise, like we talked about before, we know that Quraysh claimed to be upon the religion of Ibrahim. So they were claiming to be upon a religion of a prophet that was actually a prophet and was actually sent amongst them, amongst that area. And they worshipped Allah with some acts of worship. And they had some correct beliefs about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He was the creator and the sustainer, and so on. But they also performed shirk. So if we were going to say that this idea that any ignorance or any excuse, or any ignorance can be used as an excuse, then it's possible for someone to come and say, well, you know what, then Quraysh had an excuse and the Prophet ﷺ wasn't sent to a disbelieving people, because they said, well, no, we're following Ibrahim ﷺ and we're worshipping Allah and we're believing in Him, and they had some misconceptions, but someone could argue that it was based upon ignorance. So you see here the danger of this claim that that disbelief is only in the heart. Obviously, it's not, and the evidences for this are they're mutawatir. There's no dispute about this amongst ash-Sunnah wal-Jamâ'ah. And likewise, the idea of giving an absolute or an unrestricted idea or concept that ignorance is always an excuse, regardless of what the person does, and that. The last point that I want to mention is it comes back to what the people say about when it comes to the statement, oh, that Îmân is in the heart and you don't know what's in his heart and that type of thing. Again, like we said, yes, Îmân is in the heart. There's no dispute about that. The only people who dispute this is the Karramiyya, who are a group who are attributed to the Murji'ah, and they say in the dunya, even if the person we knew that he didn't believe it in his heart, if he said La ilaha illallah on his tongue, we would still treat him as a Muslim. And again, even they say in the hereafter he would be a disbeliever. So even there's no dispute amongst anyone that belief in the heart is a condition for a person to be Muslim. The only people who dispute is the Murji'ah, and some of them say that saying La ilaha illallah is a condition to be Muslim. So meaning if someone believed in their heart but didn't say La ilaha illallah, they wouldn't have entered Islam. Others go even further and they say, all you have to have is in your heart, but saying La ilaha illallah is evidence that you've entered Islam. So meaning you could actually be a Muslim and never say La ilaha illallah on your tongue, but you just couldn't be treated as one in the dunya, because we have no way of knowing that you're Muslim if someone doesn't say La ilaha illallah. So you see the ridiculousness of these claims that things that, any child would be able to look at this and say, well, someone doesn't say La ilaha illallah. In order to be Muslim, you need to say La ilaha illallah. But this person's still Muslim. It's a ridiculous claim, and no one who has some intellect or some intelligence would accept this type of statement. And likewise, when it comes to actions, someone to say that you can only disbelieve in your heart, like we said, this is a consensus against this idea amongst ash-Sunnah wal-Jamâ'ah. So what do we say if someone says, well, no, you don't know what's in his heart? Of course we don't know what's in his heart. Who knows what's in the hearts? Nobody. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in the heart. So, does this mean that everything that Islam came with regards to judging on someone that they've left Islam, or someone entering into Islam, and all of these concepts are thrown out the window because human beings don't know what's in the heart? Of course not, because then we're accusing the Sharia of having defects, and we're accusing the Sharia of being incomplete or imperfect. Because we're saying, well, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned all these ahkam in the Quran, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned all these ahkam in the Sunnah, but they're pointless because we need to know what's in the hearts. Or do we say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Sunnah gave us ways of dealing with people that don't require knowing what's in the heart. So we're accepting all of these ahkam and all of these things that came in the Sharia, and we're accepting the other ones as well, and we're reconciling between them. Of course we don't know what's in the heart, so what did we get in place of knowing what's in the heart? The Prophet ﷺ said, indeed there's a piece of flesh in the body that if it is righteous or if it's good, then the whole body will be good, and if it's bad, then the whole body will be bad. Indeed, that is the heart. So here the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, there's part of your body that if it's good, everything will be good. And if it's bad, everything will be bad. So the Prophet ﷺ is giving us the means of not knowing what's in the heart, but having evidence of what's in the heart based upon what? Based upon the outside. So if someone swears at Allah, do we know what's in his heart? No. Do we need to know? Of course not. Because first of all, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, if the outside is bad, well, it's most likely the inside is bad, or the inside is bad. If the outside is good, the inside is good. What are the exceptions to this? We talked about last week the hypocrites. Their outside is La ilaha illallah, and praying, and fasting, and performing jihad, and making hajj, and so on. Their insides are completely rotten. They disbelieve in their heart, and in their lowest part of the fire. This is one exception. The other exception is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the people who are forced into doing something bad, that they're compelled, or they're coerced into doing something that they didn't want to do, which is the issue of ikrah, or the issue of coercion. So if someone is forced, at gunpoint or at knife point, or that their children are threatened, or whatever else the issue is, and they do something wrong, then we say this is an exception to the rule. We don't say that his inside was bad because his outside was bad. And what's the reason? Is it just because we feel like saying that? No, it's because he's saying, you know what? Yes, I swore at Allah. The reason was, what was the reason? This person threatened my children. Okay, well there's the excuse. There's the thing that makes the exception to this general rule. But this other idea that regardless of what happens, we always say, if the person swears at Allah and throws the Quran in the garbage and never prayed in his life and kills Muslimin and so on and so on and so on, that we come in the end and say, well, we don't know what was in his heart. Well, first of all, at this point, yes, we do, because the Prophet ﷺ told us that this amount of evidence would prove that there's something wrong inside. Do we know if he believed in that it was good or not? No, we don't need to, but we know that the inside is fasid, or that the inside is rotten, or that there's something wrong with it. And likewise, even if we don't know that, we don't need to know that. We judge on the outside. And just lastly, I'll mention there's the misconception on this topic, in which one of the companions came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he mentioned that he was in battle and he went to kill one of the mushrikeen. So when he raised his sword, the mushrik said La ilaha illallah, so the Sahabi killed him. So he came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he told him what happened. And the Prophet ﷺ said, did you kill him when he said La ilaha illallah? So he said, the Prophet ﷺ replied to him, or the Sahabi replied, and he said, he only said this out of fear of being killed. So the Prophet ﷺ said, did you break open his chest to know whether it said it or not? So meaning, did you break open his chest to know whether his heart actually believed in La ilaha illallah or not? So this hadith is widespreadly, or is used in a widespread manner by people to say that you don't know what's in the heart, so you can't judge. If we look at this hadith, in a correct way, what did the Prophet ﷺ rebuke him for? Did he rebuke or make inkar or get angry at the Sahabi because he didn't judge on what was in the inside? Or did he do the opposite? The Sahabi, what did he do? He made a claim about what was in his heart. He said he only did it for this reason. The Prophet ﷺ said, did you open it up to know what it said? So you had something on the outside that was indicating one thing, and you made your own excuse about what was on the inside, and you went on that. Or you made your own claim about what was on the inside, and you went on that. That was the thing that the Prophet ﷺ clearly was making inkar and clearly was rebuking him for. So why does it then come to the opposite? Somehow, people who use this, so if the outside is bad, then the inside we can't judge on, and they use this hadith. And then the opposite as well. They say that, well, if the outside is good, then they'll use this hadith to say, well, you don't know what's in the heart either. It doesn't work that way. It's either this way or that way. It's either that you judge on the outside or you judge on the inside. It isn't that we always judge whatever is the opposite of the bad, because it's going to, give people more excuses to do whatever they want, and to do whatever they, please, and to always use this excuse that you don't know what's in my heart. So this understanding, somehow nowadays the groups of irja and the groups of the murji'ah, why use this hadith, as kind of a basis for their whole ideology. Yet, ash-Sunnah, if you look to the books of, particularly that relate to Îmân, what they call al-Asmâ'i wal-Ahkam, or the issues of labels and rulings. If you look to the books of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim and the Imams of the Najdi Da'wah and so on, they actually use this hadith in the complete opposite manner, and they use it in the correct manner. That the Prophet ﷺ was rebuking or criticizing the Sahabi for not judging with what was apparent to him. So this is what we should take from it. We shouldn't always take that we only go by what's in the heart. So, inshallah, we'll stop there. We didn't get too far in the book, but I wanted to mention this concept because it is a very, important concept, and it's the misunderstandings with regards to it are kind of widespread, all over the world, and people who use these misconceptions have the outward appearance of being very pious and being very, multazim and very following of Islam and that. So it's easier for people to fall into this. So I wanted to mention this and kind of refute or discuss some of the misconceptions or some of the ways that this is a completely false idea. But really, this whole topic would come in a topic of musamma al-Îmân, or the reality of Îmân, which, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, we can have a series on that. But we'll stop there, and then next week we'll continue with this same section, but we'll get more into further more into what the author has said. Wallahu a'lam.